The council chamber floated in the void of space, a massive ring of glass and steel where the galaxy's most powerful beings gathered to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. Lee Taman stood at the back of the human delegation section, watching as two ancient empires prepared for war. He was a quiet man, 34 years old, with tired eyes that had seen too much combat. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate armor and glowing robes worn by the other species around him. Ambassador Park Mina stood in front of him, her hands clasped behind her back, her face carefully neutral as she watched the chaos unfold. The Draxil Dominion occupied the eastern side of the chamber. They were huge creatures, standing 8 feet tall, covered in scales that looked like living armor. Their emperor, Overlord Vexith, sat on a throne that seemed to be made of melted weapons from conquered worlds. His eyes glowed red as he stared across the chamber at his ancient enemies. On the western side sat the Velkari Collective. They were beings made of living crystal, their bodies catching and bending light in ways that hurt to look at directly. Archon Luminara spoke for them, her voice like wind chimes and breaking glass combined. She floated above her delegation, rotating slowly, each facet of her crystalline body reflecting the stars beyond the chamber walls. The shattered reach belongs to the Draxil Dominion by right of ancient conquest, Vexith's voice boomed across the chamber. We claimed that space 500 years ago. Your claim is meaningless, Luminara's voice chimed back. The Velkari mapped those stars 1,000 years before your species even discovered fire. The resources there are ours by right of discovery. Taman had been listening to variations of this argument for 3 months. The Shattered Reach was a nebula full of rare minerals and elements that both empires wanted. It sat right on the border between their territories, in a small stretch of neutral space called the Terran Corridor. That neutral space belonged to humanity. The problem was that neither empire cared about human ownership. To them, humanity was barely worth noticing. Humans had only been in space for 200 years. The Draxil had conquered their planet in just 2 centuries and had been building an empire for 3,000 years after that. The Velkari had achieved perfect unity of mind and purpose 5,000 years ago and had never lost a war since. Compared to them, humans were children playing with toys they barely understood. Ambassador Park Mina raised her hand, asking to speak. The council moderator, a floating sphere of blue light, acknowledged her with a soft chime. The Terran Corridor is neutral territory, Mina said clearly. Any military action through our space would violate 17 different council treaties. We ask both empires to submit to arbitration before taking action that could lead to war. Vexith laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that made the floor vibrate. Arbitration? Little human, we do not ask permission from species who can barely defend a single solar system. The Draxil fleet will move through your corridor whether you permit it or not. The Velkari Collective agrees on this single point, Luminara added, her voice cold. Your species is irrelevant to this discussion. When our fleets meet in the Reach, we suggest you evacuate your corridor entirely. We would hate for your fragile ships to be caught in the crossfire. Several delegates from other species made sounds of agreement. The council chamber had 47 member species, but only the strongest dozen really mattered. Humanity ranked somewhere near the bottom. They had a vote, but not much else. Taman felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face calm. He had learned that skill in the Marines during the first contact war with the Draxil. That had been 15 years ago, when a Draxil raiding party had attacked a human mining colony at the edge of human space. Taman had been a young lieutenant then, commanding a platoon of Marines trying to defend civilians against enemies who were stronger, faster, and better armed. They had won that fight through stubbornness and tactics. The Draxil warriors had been used to enemies who either ran or died quickly. They were not used to enemies who set traps, who fell back and regrouped, who kept fighting even when wounded. Taman's platoon had held them off for 6 days until reinforcements arrived. Half his Marines had died. He still saw their faces sometimes when he closed his eyes. After that war ended in a tense peace, Taman had left the military. He had seen enough fighting. He had joined the diplomatic corps instead, thinking that maybe he could prevent the next war rather than fight in it. For 10 years, he had been assigned to the Galactic Council's Neutral Arbitration Division, trying to resolve disputes between species before they turned violent. He had not been very successful. Most species saw human mediators as a joke. The council session continued for another hour, with both empires refusing to back down. Finally, the moderator called for a recess. Everyone knew what that meant. War was coming. The only question was how many would die. Taman followed Ambassador Mina back to the human delegation offices, a small section of the station that seemed cramped compared to the vast halls given to more important species. Commander Kang Dae-hyun was waiting for them, still in his military uniform. He commanded the Indomitable, the largest ship in Earth's defense fleet. It was dwarfed by almost every other military vessel at the station. "How bad?" Dae-hyun asked. "Bad," Mina said, sitting down heavily. "Both fleets are already moving. Intelligence says the Draxel Armada will enter the corridor in 72 hours. The Velkari fleet will arrive from the opposite direction at almost the same time. They are going to meet in the middle of our space and start killing each other. And us along with them," Dae-hyun added grimly. "We have 47 ships in the corridor. They each have thousands. We could not stop either fleet, let alone both." Taman stood by the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 2 massive war machines were moving toward each other, and humanity stood directly in their path. "We could evacuate," Mina said quietly. "Pull all our people out of the corridor. Let them have their war." "And lose the corridor forever," Dae-hyun replied. "If we abandon it, we will never get it back. Without that space, humanity is cut off from half the galaxy. We become isolated, irrelevant." "We are already irrelevant," Mina said bitterly. "You heard them. They do not even see us as worth considering." Taman turned from the window. "That might be our advantage." Both of them looked at him. Taman was usually quiet during meetings, listening more than speaking. When he did talk, it was usually worth hearing. "What do you mean?" Mina asked. "They think we are weak," Taman said slowly. "They think we are fragile and soft and irrelevant. What if we use that?" "Use it how?" Dae-hyun's hand moved to rest on his sidearm unconsciously, an old military habit. Taman was quiet for a moment, thinking through the idea forming in his mind. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was the only path he could see that did not end in war. "Let me go talk to them," he said finally. "Both of them. Let me meet their fleets as they enter the corridor." Mina stared at him. "That is suicide. They will ignore you at best. At worst, they will vaporize your ship for being in their way." "Maybe," Taman agreed, "but maybe not. I studied both species during my time in the arbitration division. The Draxel respect courage even in enemies. The Velkari are logical and curious. If I can make them curious enough, they might listen." "Listen to what?" Dae-hyun demanded. "What could you possibly say that would stop 2 empires from 500 years of war?" Taman looked back out at the stars. "I do not know yet, but I have 72 hours to figure it out." Mina stood up and walked to stand beside him at the window. She was 53 years old, with gray streaking through her black hair. She had been in the diplomatic corps for 30 years, through 3 different wars and countless near wars. She had learned to recognize when someone had made up their mind to do something dangerous. "You really think you can stop this?" she asked quietly. "No," Taman admitted, "but I think I have to try. That is what humans do, right? We try impossible things. Sometimes we even succeed." Mina was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. I will authorize the mission. You will take a small diplomatic shuttle, fast enough to get away if they start shooting. You will have full authority to negotiate on behalf of humanity. Thank you, Ambassador. Do not thank me, Mina said. I am sending you to die. I know it. You know it. But maybe your death will mean something. Maybe it will make them pause long enough to reconsider. Taman did not argue with her assessment. She was probably right, but he had learned a long time ago that sometimes the only way forward was to walk toward danger instead of away from it. He spent the next 2 days preparing. He reviewed everything known about both empires, their military tactics, their cultural values, their psychology. Dr. Han Ji-woo, the human xenopsychologist on staff, helped him understand what made both species different from humans. The Draxil evolved as apex predators, Ji-woo explained. They conquered their planet in 200 years because nothing could stand against them. They have never known weakness. They measure worth by strength. And the Velkari? The opposite. They achieved perfect unity. No conflict. No disagreement. Every Velkari mind is connected to every other. They have never known what it means to be alone or uncertain. They measure worth by efficiency and logic. And humans? Ji-woo smiled sadly. We evolved on a death world. Everything tried to kill us. We were never the strongest or fastest. We survived by being stubborn, by refusing to quit even when we should have. Is that enough? Taman asked. I do not know, Ji-woo admitted, but it is all we have. On the morning of the 3rd day, Taman boarded his shuttle. Kim Hyunjin would be his pilot. She was young, only 25, and she was terrified. Her hands shook as she ran through the pre-flight checklist. You do not have to come, Taman told her. I can fly this myself. No, sir, Hyunjin said firmly. You need a pilot. I am a pilot. That means I go. Taman nodded, respecting her courage. They launched from the station and began the journey toward the corridor. Behind them, the human defense fleet formed up, led by Commander Daehyun's Indomitable. If this failed, they would be humanity's last defense. As they flew, Taman could see them on the sensors. First, the Draxil fleet appeared on one side, thousands of dark, angular warships, each bristling with weapons. Then the Velkari appeared on the other side, their crystalline vessels bending light around them, making them hard to count. And in between, flying alone in a small shuttle, was one human who believed that weakness might be stronger than strength. Where do you want me to position us? Hyunjin asked, her voice tight with fear. Taman studied the tactical display. He found the exact center point between both approaching fleets, the spot where the first shots would be fired, the place where 2 empires would collide. There, he said, pointing. Right there. Hyunjin looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. But as she guided the shuttle to that exact position, Taman felt strangely calm. He had walked toward death before. He knew what it felt like. This was different. This felt like purpose. The shuttle settled into position. Both fleets continued to approach. In minutes, they would be in weapons range. In hours, the war would begin. Taman opened a communications channel to both fleets. His hands did not shake. This is Lee Taman of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, he said clearly. I am positioned between your fleets. If you want your war, I will be your first casualty, and the entire galaxy will watch you kill an unarmed diplomat to get it. There was silence. Then both fleets stopped advancing. For the first time in 500 years, the Draxil and Velkari had agreed on something. They were both confused by the strange, weak human who stood in their way. The silence lasted exactly 14 seconds. Taman counted them, watching the tactical display as both massive fleets held their positions. Then his communications console exploded with incoming messages from both sides. Human vessel, you will move immediately or be destroyed. The voice belonged to General Kyrix, the Draxil tactical commander. His image appeared on one screen, all scales and sharp teeth and barely controlled rage. On another screen, a crystalline form materialized. Sentinel Crystalline of the Velkari fleet spoke in that wind chime voice. "Your presence is an illogical obstacle. Remove yourself or be removed." Kim Hyun-jin gripped the shuttle controls so hard her knuckles turned white. "Sir, I can get us out of here in 30 seconds. "Hold position," Taman said calmly. "They are going to kill us." "Maybe, but not yet. They are curious now." He was right. If either fleet had truly wanted them dead, they would already be dead. But instead, both fleets had stopped. They were waiting to see what this strange human would do next. Taman needed to use that curiosity before it turned back into anger. He thought back to his conversation with Dr. Han Ji-woo before he left. She had explained something important about both species that might save his life now. "The Draxil see everything as a test of strength," she had said, "but they respect courage. If you show fear, they will crush you. If you show bravery, they might listen." "And the Velkari? They are logical. They solve problems. If you present them with an interesting problem, they will want to solve it before they destroy you." Taman opened the channel again. "General Kyrix, you say I am in your way. I say you are in mine. The Terran corridor belongs to humanity. You are the trespasser here." Kyrix's laugh was like grinding metal. "You claim to own space? With what army? Little human? I have 10,000 warships. You have one tiny shuttle that I could vaporize with a single shot." "Yes," Taman agreed. "You could, but you have not. Why?" That made Kyrix pause. On the other screen, Sentinel Crystalline tilted slightly, her crystalline structure rotating as she processed this interaction. "You confuse hesitation for mercy," Kyrix said. "I am simply following protocol. Normally we warn civilians before we fire. Consider yourself warned." "I am not a civilian," Taman replied. "I am a diplomat with full authority to negotiate on behalf of humanity, and I am formally requesting that both fleets halt their advance and enter arbitration talks." "Absurd," Crystalline's voice chimed. "Your species has nothing to offer in these negotiations. This conflict is 500 years old. It predates your entire spacefaring civilization." "Exactly," Taman said, "which means I have no history with either of you. No grudges, no inherited hatred. I can be neutral in a way neither of you can be with each other." He watched both commanders process this. It was a weak argument, and they knew it. But it was an argument, which meant they were still talking instead of shooting. That was progress. Behind him in the shuttle, Hyun-jin was monitoring the sensor readings. "Sir, I am picking up weapon charging signatures from both fleets. They are preparing to fire." "Not at us," Taman said. "At each other. They are preparing for battle. We are just in the way." "That is not comforting." Taman allowed himself a small smile. He liked Hyun-jin. She was terrified, but she stayed at her post. That took a special kind of courage. "Tell me, General Kyrix," Taman said, "have you ever wondered why humans are still here? Why we have not been conquered yet?" "I assume we have simply not bothered," Kyrix replied. "Your worlds offer little value." "Maybe. Or maybe we are harder to conquer than we look. 15 years ago, your raiders attacked one of our mining colonies, a small settlement with 300 civilians and 1 platoon of Marines. Do you know what happened?" Kyrix was silent. He did not like being reminded of the First Contact War. The Draxil had assumed it would be an easy raid. It had not been. 40 Marines held off 200 Draxil warriors for 6 days, Taman continued. "We lost 20 Marines in that fight. But we held, not because we were stronger, because we refused to quit." "You sound like you were there," Crystalline observed. "I was. I commanded those Marines." Taman's voice stayed level, but memories flooded back. The smell of blood, the sound of Draxil roaring as they attacked again and again. His sergeant, a woman named Park Ji-hee, dying in his arms from wounds that would have been minor to a Draxil, but were fatal to a human. "One battle proves nothing," Kyrix said dismissively. "It proves that humans understand something you do not," Taman said. "We know what it means to be weak, to be outmatched, to face enemies we should not be able to defeat, and we know how to win anyway." On the Indomitable, Commander Kang Dae-hyun was watching the same exchange on his bridge screens. His crew was silent, waiting to see if their diplomat could actually pull off a miracle. "He is insane," his first officer muttered. "No," Dae-hyun said quietly. "He is a Marine. We are all a little insane." Dae-hyun had fought in that same battle 15 years ago. He had been a young lieutenant, leading a different platoon. He remembered Taman's tactical brilliance under pressure. The way he had turned every weakness into an advantage. The way he had kept fighting even when wounded. Back on the shuttle, Taman was making his next move. "I challenge both of you. Send your best warrior to my position. Let them face me in combat." Hyunjin's head whipped around. "Sir, what are you doing?" "Something stupid," Taman admitted, "but necessary." "You challenge us?" Kyrix sounded genuinely surprised. "You want to fight?" "I want to show you what human weakness really looks like," Taman said. "You think strength is scales and claws and superior weapons. I will show you that you are wrong." There was a long pause. Then Kyrix began to laugh. It was not a mocking laugh this time. It was genuine amusement mixed with something like respect. "You have spirit, human. I like that. Very well. I will send Champion Drexor. He has killed 500 enemies in personal combat. He will show you the price of challenging the Draxil." "The Velkari accept as well," Crystalline added. "Blade Luminos will demonstrate the superiority of crystalline perfection over organic fragility." The communications cut. Hyunjin stared at Taman in horror. "They are sending their champions, their best warriors. Sir, they are going to kill you." "Probably," Taman agreed. He began removing his diplomatic jacket and reaching for something in his storage locker. "Then why did you challenge them?" "Because I do not need to win the fight," Taman explained. "I need to win their respect, and sometimes the only way to get someone's respect is to show them you are not afraid to die." He pulled out a pressure suit, one of the thin emergency suits every shuttle carried. He began putting it on under his clothes, working quickly but carefully. Hyunjin watched in confusion. "What are you planning?" "You will see. When they arrive, follow my lead, and be ready to repressurize the shuttle on my signal." 10 minutes later, the sensors picked up 2 incoming signatures. One was a Draxil military transport. The other was a beam of crystalline light. They both converged on the shuttle at the same time. Champion Drexor materialized first, using Draxil teleportation technology. He was huge, even for a Draxil. 8 feet of muscle and scale and barely restrained violence. His body was covered in ritual scars, each one marking a battle won. He looked around the small shuttle interior with obvious disdain. His eyes found Taman, who stood calmly in the center of the cabin. Drexor's expression shifted from anticipation to disappointment. "This is the challenger? A thin human in wrinkled clothes?" The warrior's voice was deep enough to vibrate the deck plates. "Where is your armor? Your weapons? This is an insult." "I need no armor," Taman said simply. "I challenge you to survive what humans survive every day." Before Drexor could respond, Taman reached over and slammed his hand on the emergency airlock release. The shuttle's entire side panel blew open. Atmosphere screamed out into the vacuum of space. The sudden decompression was violent enough to throw loose objects across the cabin. Hyunjin, strapped into her pilot seat and prepared for this, held on tight. Drexer roared in rage and pain. Draxil biology allowed them to survive in vacuum for several minutes. But explosive decompression was agonizing even for them. The sudden pressure change felt like being crushed and torn apart at the same time. His scales, normally protection, trapped pockets of air that expanded painfully. Taman, wearing his hidden pressure suit, walked calmly through the chaos. His voice came through his suit radio, broadcasting to Drexer's translator. "This is what we endure. Our bodies are weak. Our skin tears in vacuum. Our blood boils at low pressure. But we learn to survive it anyway." He moved to the airlock controls. "Our world tried to kill us every day. Predators hunted us. Diseases infected us. Weather froze us or burned us. We had no scales, no claws, no natural weapons. We survived by being smarter and more stubborn than anything trying to kill us." Drexor was struggling now. His superior biology extending his survival time, but not eliminating his suffering. Taman watched him carefully, counting seconds. The champion was strong enough to last maybe 4 minutes in hard vacuum. Taman could not let him suffer permanent damage. "We know what weakness is," Taman continued. "We live with it every moment, but we learned something you never had to learn. Weakness makes you adaptable. Weakness makes you clever. Weakness makes you refuse to quit." At 3 minutes, Taman sealed the airlock and began repressurization. Air flooded back into the cabin. Drexer gasped, his scales rippling as pressure normalized. He slumped against the wall, not injured, but shaken. For the first time in his life, Champion Drexor had felt truly vulnerable. He looked at the human with new eyes, eyes that held something like respect. "You are brave," Drexor said when he could speak again. "Insane, but brave." "No," Taman replied. "I am normal. Every human knows that space wants to kill us. We fly through it anyway. That is not courage. That is just being human." Before Drexor could respond, the second visitor arrived. Blade Luminos flowed into the shuttle like living light. Her crystalline form was beautiful and deadly at the same time. She looked at Drexor's disheveled state with cold calculation. "A demonstration of human treachery," she chimed. "Noted." "Not treachery," Taman said. "Reality. Your turn." He led her to the shuttle's medical bay, where a computer console displayed human medical files. Drexor followed, curious now despite himself. "You think showing me human medical data will affect me?" Luminos asked. "I am crystalline structure. Perfect and unchanging. I have no diseases, no weaknesses. Let me show you something." Taman brought up a file. "This is Ambassador Park Mina. She has diabetes. Her own body tries to kill her every day. Without medicine, she would die." He pulled up another file. "Commander Kang Dae-hyun. Chronic pain from an old injury. Every movement hurts." Another file. "Kim Hyun-jin, my pilot. Anxiety disorder. Every mission terrifies her." His own file appeared. "Lee Taman. Post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, flashbacks. I relive my worst moments over and over." Luminos processed this information. "Then you are all defective. These are broken individuals. Why do you use them for important positions?" "Because we are not broken," Taman said firmly. "We are normal. Most humans carry wounds like these, physical or mental. We are fragile beings living in a universe that can kill us easily, and yet we still show up. We still serve. We still fight." He looked at both warriors. "You call us weak because we can be hurt. But we learned something from being hurt. We learned that the strongest thing in the universe is not being unable to break. It is continuing to function even when you are broken." Drexor rumbled thoughtfully. "We conquered our world because nothing could stand against us. We have always been strong." "Exactly," Taman said. "You have never had to learn what we learned. You have never had to face enemies stronger than you and find a way to win anyway. You have never had to survive with wounds that will never heal. And this makes you superior? Luminosa's voice carried skepticism. No, it makes us different. It makes us understand something you do not. That strength is not what you can take without breaking. Strength is what you survive and keep fighting through. Both warriors were silent. Taman could see them processing this, trying to fit these ideas into worldviews built on completely different foundations. Finally, Drexer spoke. I will report this to General Kyrix. The Draxil respect strength. Perhaps we have been measuring it incorrectly. Luminos rippled with thought. I will inform Sentinel Crystalline. This data presents interesting variables we have not calculated. They both left the shuttle, returning to their respective fleets. Yunjin finally let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. Sir, did that actually work? I do not know, Taman admitted, but we are still alive. That is a start. On both flagships, the reports from their champions created confusion and discussion. Overlord Vexith and Archon Luminara conferred separately with their commanders. Both fleets remained at their positions, weapons still charged but not firing, and in his small shuttle between two empires, Taman waited to see if showing weakness could actually prevent a war. Hours later, both commanders contacted him again. This time, their tones were different. Not friendly, but not dismissive either. Human Taman, Vexith's voice rumbled. You have earned the right to speak. We will hear your proposal for peace. The Velkari Collective agrees, Luminara added. Your species has proven itself interesting. We will listen. Once. Taman felt relief flood through him. It was not peace yet, but it was a chance. And sometimes, a chance was all you needed. Taman stood in two places at once, or at least that was how it felt. Holographic projection technology allowed him to appear on both the Draxil flagship and the Velkari command crystal simultaneously. His image flickered slightly as the systems worked to keep him synchronized across impossible distances. The Draxil flagship was called Deathbringer, which told you everything you needed to know about their culture. The command deck was huge, designed for warriors twice human size. Red emergency lighting bathed everything in the color of blood. Overlord Vexith sat on his throne of melted weapons, surrounded by hundreds of officers and nobles, all watching Taman with varying degrees of hostility and curiosity. The Velkari command structure was completely different. Archon Luminara floated in the center of a massive crystalline chamber. Thousands of smaller Velkari minds surrounded her, all connected, all thinking together. When one spoke, they all agreed. It was like negotiating with a single entity that had a million eyes. You have our attention, human, Vexith said. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Use it wisely. You will not get a second chance. We agree, Luminara's wind chime voice added. Present your solution to a conflict that has existed for 500 years. We are curious to hear what a species 200 years old believes it can contribute. Taman took a breath. He had spent the last 6 hours preparing for this moment. Ambassador Park Mina had sent him every piece of data humanity possessed about the shattered reach. Dr. Han Jiwoo had briefed him on the psychological pressure points of both species. Commander Kang Dae-hyun had provided military analysis. But none of that would matter if he could not make them listen with open minds. Before I present my solution, Taman said, I need to understand your positions clearly. Overlord Vexith, why does the Draxil Dominion claim the shattered reach? Vexith's eyes glowed brighter. 500 years ago, we discovered that region. We mapped it. We claimed it by right of conquest, as is our way. The fact that we have not yet developed it is irrelevant. It is ours. And you, Archon Luminara? The Valkyrie achieved spaceflight 1,000 years ago. Our ancient records show that our explorers cataloged the Shattered Reach 300 years before the Draxil even left their homeworld. By right of first discovery, it belongs to us. So you both have legitimate historical claims, Taman said. Only our claim is legitimate, both replied at exactly the same time, then glared at each other across the light years. Taman had expected this. He continued carefully. The Reach contains rare elements, crystalline formations with unique properties, exotic matter that could revolutionize energy production. Both of your empires need these resources. Obviously, General Kyrix spoke up from his position near Vexith's throne, which is why we will take them by force if necessary. And we will defend our rightful claim with overwhelming force, Sentinel Crystalline added from the Valkyrie side. Then let me tell you what will actually happen, Taman said. His voice stayed calm but firm. You will go to war. Millions will die. Your economies will collapse under the military spending. And in the end, neither of you will win because the Shattered Reach will be destroyed in the fighting. Bold words, Vexith rumbled. Do you have evidence for these claims? I do. Taman nodded to Ambassador Mina, watching from the human station. She transmitted data to both flagships. 3 days ago, our science vessel completed a detailed scan of the Shattered Reach. What we found changes everything. The data began displaying on screens throughout both command centers. Taman walked them through it, using simple terms that both species could understand. The Reach is not stable. The exotic matter formations are in a state of slow decay. Any large-scale mining operation will accelerate that decay. Within 50 years of intensive mining, the entire region will undergo a cascade failure. Define cascade failure, Luminara demanded. The exotic matter will collapse. The energy release will be equivalent to a supernova. Everything within 20 light years will be destroyed, including significant portions of both your border territories. Silence fell across both command centers. Officers and crystalline minds alike processed this information with growing alarm. You lie, Kyrix snarled. This is a human trick to deny us our prize. Verify it yourself, Taman replied calmly. We have provided all our raw sensor data. Your science divisions are more advanced than ours. Check our findings. On the Draxil flagship, Vexith gestured to his science officers. They began analyzing the data. On the Valkyrie crystal, thousands of minds focused on the problem simultaneously. Taman waited, knowing this was the critical moment. If they dismissed the data as false, this all ended in war. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, an old Draxil stepped forward from the group of nobles. He was ancient by their standards, his scales faded and scarred from countless battles. This was Elder Vornak, and when he spoke, even Vexith listened. The human data is accurate, Vornak said heavily. I remember old stories from my grandfather's time, tales of an ancient civilization that once mined the Reach. They triggered something and had to flee. We always thought they were myths, but this data suggests those stories were true. On the Valkyrie side, Luminara's crystals dimmed slightly, their version of a frown. Our deep historical archives confirm similar legends. The region was once called the Forbidden Nebula. We assumed it was superstition. We were wrong. Taman felt hope rising, but kept it off his face. So we agree. The Reach is dangerous. Large-scale mining will eventually destroy it and everything nearby. Then it is worthless, Kyrix concluded. There is nothing to fight over. That is where you are wrong, Taman said quickly. The resources are still valuable. They still exist, but they must be extracted carefully, slowly, over a much longer time period. Instead of intensive mining over decades, you need careful extraction over centuries. Centuries? Vexith's laugh was bitter. And who controls this centuries-long operation? You ask us to trust each other for that long? Impossible. I am not asking you to trust each other, Taemin said. I am asking you to trust humanity. That got their attention. Luminara rotated slowly, all her facets reflecting Taemin's hologram. Explain. This was it. The solution he had worked out with Ambassador Mina and her team. It was risky, possibly insane, but it was the only path he could see that led to peace. Here is my proposal. The Terran corridor becomes an expanded neutral zone that includes the Shattered Reach. Humanity manages the mining operation as a neutral third party. All profits are split equally between the Draxel Dominion and the Velkari Collective. The operation is designed to last 300 years, with regular payments to both empires throughout that time. You want us to let humans control our resources? Kyrix's voice dripped with disbelief. No, I want you to let humans prevent those resources from becoming a tomb for billions. Taemin met Vexith's glowing eyes directly. Your alternative is war. Best case, you win, but lose half your fleet doing it. Worst case, you trigger the cascade and lose multiple core worlds. My way, you both profit without risking anything. The logic is sound, Luminara admitted, but it requires trust in a species we barely know. Then let me tell you what you need to know about humanity, Taemin said. We are not strong enough to conquer you. We are not advanced enough to trick you. All we can do is exactly what we promise. We are too weak to be a threat, which makes us the perfect neutral party. Elder Vornak made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. The human argues that his weakness is his strength. There is wisdom in that. There is also risk, Vexith countered. What stops humanity from keeping the profits for themselves? Mutual oversight, Taemin replied. Both empires will have permanent observer stations in the Reach, full access to all financial records, audits every cycle. You will both see exactly what is being extracted and where the money goes. Any discrepancy gives you the right to terminate the contract and take over the operation yourselves. Ambassador Mina was monitoring the negotiations from the human station. She sent a private message to Taemin's earpiece. You are offering them everything. We get almost nothing except the right to manage this for 3 centuries. Taemin sent back a silent acknowledgement. She was right. This deal gave humanity no direct profit, but it gave them something more valuable. It made them essential. It made them the bridge between 2 empires. Over 300 years, that would be worth more than any amount of exotic matter. What about employment? Sentinel Crystalline asked. 300 years of operations will require significant labor forces. Shared, Taemin said. Workers from all 3 species, engineers from the Draxel, technicians from the Velkari, coordinators from humanity. We build this together, which means we all profit from stability. The negotiations continued for hours. Every detail was examined, every potential problem discussed. Both empires brought up objection after objection, and Taemin had to find answers that satisfied both sides without favoring either. At one point, General Kyrix demanded guaranteed military access to the Reach for security purposes. Taemin knew that if he agreed, the Velkari would see it as bias. If he refused, the Draxel might walk away. Security will be provided by a joint task force, he proposed. Draxel ships, Velkari vessels, and human coordinators working together. Any military action requires unanimous agreement from all 3 species. That way, no one can use force without the others approving. It was a compromise that made everyone slightly unhappy, which probably meant it was fair. The sun set and rose 3 times on Taemin's home world during these negotiations. He barely slept, sustained by stimulants and stubbornness. Kim Hyunjin brought him food, which he ate without tasting. Dr. Han Jiwoo provided cultural advice when discussions threatened to break down over misunderstandings. On the 3rd day, something shifted. Both sides stopped looking for reasons to reject the proposal and started looking for ways to make it work. Taemin recognized this moment from his arbitration training. the moment when both parties started to believe peace might actually be possible. Finally, Overlord Vexith rose from his throne. The massive Draxil looked tired, which surprised Taman. He had not realized they could show fatigue. "The Draxil Dominion will accept this proposal," Vexith said formally, "on the condition that the first mining operation be supervised by Draxil engineers to ensure human competence." "The Velkari Collective agrees," Luminara chimed, "with the condition that Velkari technology be used for all sensitive detection equipment to ensure accuracy." Taman nodded. Both conditions were reasonable and roughly balanced. "Humanity accepts both conditions. We will draft a formal treaty incorporating all details we have discussed. Both empires will have 30 days to review before the signing ceremony." "Where will this ceremony take place?" Kyrix asked suspiciously. "In the Terran corridor," Taman said. "In neutral space. Both delegations will be protected by the joint task force we discussed. It will be the first test of our cooperation." After the transmissions ended, Taman collapsed into a chair. The adrenaline that had sustained him drained away all at once, leaving him shaking with exhaustion. Ambassador Mina appeared beside him, her hologram glowing softly. "You did it. You actually stopped a 500-year Cold War from going hot." "We stopped it," Taman corrected. "For now. The real test comes during the treaty signing. 30 days from now. You think something will go wrong? I think both empires have extremists who will see this peace as weakness. They will try to sabotage it." Taman closed his eyes. "And when they try, we need to be ready." Commander Kang Daehyun's face appeared on another screen. "Intelligence confirms your suspicion. We are picking up encrypted communications from fringe elements in both militaries. They are not happy about peace." "Then we have 30 days to prepare," Taman said, forcing himself to stand despite his exhaustion. "Let's get to work." The treaty documents were drafted over the following weeks. Teams of lawyers and diplomats from all three species worked together, translating not just language but concepts and cultural assumptions. What seemed clear to one species was ambiguous to another. Every word was negotiated. Dr. Han Ji-woo led cultural sensitivity training for the humans who would work in the Reach. They learned Draxil protocols for showing respect. They learned how to communicate with Velkari hive minds without causing confusion. It was exhausting work, but necessary. During this time, Champion Drexer and Blade Luminos both requested private meetings with Taman. They had returned to their fleets after their encounter on the shuttle, but something had changed in them. Drexer spoke first when they met via hologram. "I have been thinking about our fight. You opened your ship to vacuum. You could have died if your equipment failed." "Yes," Taman agreed. "Why take such a risk?" "Because I needed you to understand. Words were not enough. You had to feel what human fragility means." Drexor was quiet for a moment. "In Draxil culture, we prove strength through combat. But you proved something different. You proved that surviving is harder than winning." Blade Luminos's meeting was different. The crystalline warrior did not understand human emotion, but she understood logic. "Your species should not survive," she stated flatly. "By all statistical models, you are too fragile, too conflicted, too chaotic, yet you persist." "Because we adapted," Taman explained. "We learned to use our weaknesses as advantages. Our fragility made us careful. Our conflicts made us creative. Our chaos made us flexible." Flexibility. Luminos rotated, refracting light in thoughtful patterns. "The Velkari prize stability, perfect order, but I am beginning to understand that inflexibility is its own weakness." These conversations gave Taman hope. If even warriors from both sides could learn to see differently, maybe peace had a real chance. But intelligence reports continued to warn of threats. Someone was planning something. and the treaty signing ceremony was approaching fast. 20 days passed, then 25. The date was set. The location was chosen. A massive neutral station in the Terran corridor would host delegations from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to witness the impossible. Two ancient enemies signing a peace treaty brokered by the weakest species in the Council. 5 days before the ceremony, Commander Daehyun contacted Taemin with urgent news. "We cracked some of the encrypted communications. There is definitely a plot. Extremists from both sides are planning a joint attack on the ceremony." "They are cooperating?" Taemin was surprised. "The first cooperation between Draxil and Velkari, and it is to sabotage peace?" "Ironic, isn't it?" Daehyun's expression was grim. "We don't have details yet, but they are planning something big." Taemin made a decision. "Don't tell the delegations. If we warn them, the ceremony will be canceled. The peace process will collapse." "So we just let them walk into a trap?" "No," Taemin said firmly. "We spring the trap first. Find the conspirators. Stop them before they can act." Ambassador Mina objected when she heard this plan. "That is too risky. What if you fail?" "Then we fail," Taemin said. "But if we cancel the ceremony, we definitely fail. At least this way we have a chance." In the end, she agreed. They had come too far to give up now. The stage was set, the ceremony would happen, and somewhere in the shadows, enemies of peace were preparing to destroy everything Taemin had built. He had 5 days to stop them. The neutral station called Unity Point had been built in just 3 weeks. 3 species working together had accomplished what would have taken any one of them months. The station floated in the exact center of the Terran corridor, a massive wheel of metal and crystal and human engineering. It was supposed to be a symbol of cooperation. Instead, it might become a tomb. Taemin walked through the main conference hall, checking security for the 5th time that day. The ceremony would happen in 18 hours. Delegations were already arriving. Thousands of diplomats, observers, and journalists from dozens of species wanted to witness history being made, or history being destroyed. "Anything?" he asked into his communicator. Commander Kang Daehyun's voice crackled back. "Nothing yet. Our teams are monitoring all arrivals. If the conspirators are already on the station, they are well hidden." Taemin stopped at a viewport and looked out at the gathering ships. The Draxil delegation flagship was a massive warship, its weapons powered down but still intimidating. The Velkari had arrived in a crystalline vessel that looked more like a sculpture than a ship. Between them, smaller human vessels maintained careful watch. "They have to make their move soon," Taemin said. "Once Overlord Vexith and Archon Luminara are both on the station, security will be too tight." "Unless they are already inside," suggested Kim Hyun-jin, who was monitoring sensor feeds from a nearby console. She looked tired. Everyone looked tired. The last month had been exhausting. Ambassador Park Mina joined them at the viewport. She moved stiffly, her diabetes making her joints ache, but she refused to rest. "I have been thinking," she said quietly. "What if we are wrong? What if there is no attack?" "Then we will have wasted time being careful," Taemin replied. "I can live with that." "But what if we are right and we fail to stop it?" Taemin had no answer for that. They stood in silence, watching more ships arrive. Elsewhere on the station, 2 beings moved through the shadows. Infiltrator Zin was a Draxil warrior, but smaller than most of his species. That had always made him angry. In Draxil culture, size meant status. Zin had compensated by becoming deadly in other ways. Stealth, poison, sabotage. He despised the peace treaty. The Draxil were warriors. Making deals with enemies was weakness. Overlord Vexith had betrayed everything the Dominion stood for. Moving through the station's maintenance corridors, Zin met his unlikely ally. Purifier Nexus was a Velkari extremist, though calling it an individual was not quite accurate. It was a fragment of the collective that had rejected the consensus. The Velkari prized unity above all else. Nexus was an abomination, a crystalline mind that had chosen isolation and independent thought. Together they represented the fringe elements of both empires. They hated each other almost as much as they hated the peace treaty, but they hated compromise more. "The device is ready?" Zin's voice was barely a whisper. Nexus's crystalline form pulsed with dark light. "Affirmative. Placement will occur during the ceremony. Both delegations will be eliminated. The humans will be blamed. And we will trigger the war that should have happened." Zin's smile showed too many teeth. "As it should be." They separated, returning to their hiding places. Both were disguised as low-level staff members in their respective delegations. No one suspected them. They had been planning this for months, since the first rumors of peace talks began. Taman, meanwhile, was meeting with his unlikely allies. Champion Drexer and Blade Luminos had both volunteered to help hunt the conspirators. They stood in a secure conference room, an odd trio that represented everything the extremists feared. "I know Infiltrator Zin," Drexer said, his voice heavy. "We served together years ago. He is brilliant and deadly. If he is part of this, we are in serious danger." "And Purifier Nexus," Luminos added, her crystalline structure flickering with distaste. "It broke from the collective 5 years ago. We tried to reintegrate it, failed. It sees cooperation as weakness. It will not hesitate to kill to prove its point. So we are looking for 2 highly trained killers hiding among thousands of delegates," Taman summarized, "both of whom know their species' security protocols inside out." "Correct," Drexer confirmed. "Great." Taman allowed himself a moment of frustration. Then he focused. "What can you tell me about their methods? How would they attack?" Drexer considered this. "Zin prefers indirect approaches. He will not charge into battle. He will set traps, use technology, strike from hiding." "Nexus is similar," Luminos said. "It can manipulate energy fields, crystalline structures. It could weaponize the station itself if given access to the right systems." The main conference hall, Taman realized. During the ceremony, all leadership will be gathered in one place. If they could compromise the hall's systems, they could kill everyone at once, Drexer finished grimly. Taman immediately contacted Commander Daehyun. "I need engineering teams to scan every system in the conference hall. Look for anything unusual, any modification, any foreign code, any device that should not be there." "On it," Daehyun replied. "But sir, we have 12 hours until the ceremony begins. If they planted something weeks ago, it could be anywhere." "Then we search everywhere." The next hours were frantic. Human engineers worked alongside Draxil technicians and Velkari crystalline analysts. They scanned power systems, life support, gravity generators, communication arrays, everything. They found nothing. "Maybe we are wrong," Kim Hyun-jin suggested. "Maybe the intelligence was false." "Or maybe they have not planted the device yet," Taemin said. He was exhausted, but his mind kept working. "They would wait until the last possible moment, less chance of discovery." "Then they are still planning to move," Drexor said. "We need to find them before they reach the conference hall." Ambassador Mina had an idea. "What if we let them make their move, set up surveillance and catch them in the act?" "Too risky," Luminos objected. "If we fail to stop them, thousands die. But if we try to find them now and fail, they go deeper into hiding. We lose our chance." Mina looked at Taman. "It is your call." Taman weighed the options. Both were terrible. But one offered a chance to catch the conspirators and prove to both empires that extremists on both sides were the real enemy. That might actually strengthen the peace. "We set a trap," he decided. "But we need bait." He realized what that bait had to be. Himself. 6 hours before the ceremony, Taman made a public announcement. He would be inspecting the conference hall personally, alone, for security reasons. It was unusual for the chief negotiator to do this, but everyone accepted it. Taman had proven himself unpredictable. What the announcement did not say was that Taman was wearing sensors that fed his location to 3 separate security teams. Drexer, Luminos, and Commander Dae-hyun were all watching from hidden positions. If anyone tried to attack Taman, they would be caught. Taman walked through the empty conference hall, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The hall was beautiful, designed by architects from all 3 species. Draxil's strength in the support structure, Velkari elegance in the crystalline lighting, human creativity in the layout that encouraged communication. It would be a shame to die here, Taman thought. He heard movement behind him. Turning slowly, he saw a small Draxil emerge from a maintenance shaft. Infiltrator Zin. "I knew you would come," Taman said calmly. "You could not resist the chance to sabotage this in person." Zin's eyes glowed with hatred. "You think you are clever, human, but I know about your security teams. I know they are watching." He gestured, and a crystalline form materialized on the opposite side of the hall. Purifier Nexus. "We know this is a trap," Nexus's voice chimed. "But it does not matter. We have already won." Taman felt his blood run cold. "What did you do?" "The device is not in this hall," Zin explained with obvious pleasure. "It is in the station's reactor core, timed to detonate during the ceremony. By the time anyone realizes, it will be too late." "The entire station will be destroyed," Nexus added. "Both delegations, all witnesses, and the evidence will point to human sabotage. The peace treaty dies today." Taman activated his communicator. "Dae-hyun, the reactor core, now!" But Zin laughed. "Your teams are too far away. The core is in the center of the station. 10 minutes to reach it. The device activates in 5. Drexer and Luminos burst into the hall from different entrances, but they faced the same problem. Too far from the core. Not enough time. Taman made a split-second decision. "Hyunjin, where is the nearest access point to the reactor?" "Maintenance shaft Alpha 7, she responded immediately. "But sir, it is a 60-meter vertical drop with no safety systems. It was designed for equipment, not people." "How long to climb down?" "Climb? Sir, you would fall. The shaft has no ladder, no handholds." "How long to fall?" Taman demanded. 8 seconds, but the impact would kill you." Taman was already running. He heard Drexor roar behind him, fighting Zin. He heard Luminos's crystalline structure clash against Nexus's, but he blocked it out, focusing on the path ahead. He reached shaft Alpha 7 and looked down, 60 meters of darkness, with a metal grate at the bottom. Hyunjin was right. This would kill him. Probably. He jumped. The fall was terrifying and strangely peaceful at the same time. 8 seconds was not long, but it was enough time to think, to remember, to accept that he might die doing this. He thought about his Marines from 15 years ago, the ones who had died defending that colony. They had not hesitated. They had done what was necessary. So would he. At the last second, he activated his personal shield, the small emergency field that all diplomats carried. It was not designed to stop a fall like this, but it might reduce the impact enough to keep him alive. He hit the grate hard. Pain exploded through his entire body. Something broke. He was not sure what. But he was conscious. He was moving. The reactor core entrance was right there. He crawled toward it, ignoring the protests from his body. His communicator crackled. "Sir, 3 minutes." Taman pulled himself through the entrance into the reactor chamber. The device was easy to spot, a crystalline and metal hybrid attached to the core's power regulator. Draxil technology and Velkari engineering working together for destruction. He examined it quickly. 2 minutes left. The device was sophisticated, tamper-proof, encrypted. He could not disarm it, but he could remove it. The device was connected to the core by magnetic clamps. Taman grabbed it and pulled. It did not budge. His broken body could not generate enough force. 90 seconds! Taman looked around desperately. There was an emergency toolkit on the wall. He grabbed a plasma cutter, normally used for repairs. He had never used one before. He activated it and pressed it against the magnetic clamps. The plasma beam cut through metal like paper, but it was slow. So slow. 60 seconds! He was halfway through the first clamp. There were 4 total. He would not make it. Unless. Taman changed targets. Instead of cutting the clamps, he cut the core's power regulator itself. If he could separate the device from its power source, it might not matter if it was still attached. 30 seconds! The plasma cutter burned through the regulator. Sparks flew. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. He was probably causing a reactor shutdown. That would be inconvenient. Better than exploding. 20 seconds! The regulator separated. The device went dark. Its connection to power severed. But it had an internal power supply. It was still counting down. 15 seconds! Taman grabbed the device, clamps and all, and ran. Or tried to run. His broken body managed a stumbling jog. He made it out of the reactor chamber into a disposal chute used for waste ejection. 10 seconds! He threw the device down the chute and slapped the emergency ejection button. 5 seconds! The chute activated, blowing the device out into space. 3, 2, 1. The device detonated in the void beyond the station. The explosion was visible through viewports across Unity Point, a brief flash of light that could have destroyed everything, but did not. Taman collapsed against the wall, barely conscious. His communicator was screaming with voices, all talking at once. "Sir, are you alive? Medical teams to reactor level. The ceremony is safe. Taman, respond." He managed to trigger the communicator. "Still here," he whispered. "Trapped conspirators in conference hall. Stop them." Then darkness took him. When he woke up, he was in the medical bay. Dr. Han Ji-woo was standing over him with a scanner. She smiled when she saw his eyes open. "You have 3 broken ribs, a fractured arm, internal bruising, and a concussion," she said. "You should not be alive." "How long was I out?" 4 hours. The ceremony starts in 1 hour. "Did they catch them? Zin and Nexus?" "Yes. Champion Drexor and Blade Luminos captured them both. They are being held in secure detention." Taman tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt. "You need to rest," Ji-woo said firmly. "I need to be at that ceremony." "You can barely move." "Then wheel me there in this medical bed if you have to," Taman said. "I have to see this through." In the end, they compromised. Taman would attend but would sit rather than stand. His broken body would be hidden behind diplomatic robes. He would look dignified, even if he felt like death. 1 hour later, the conference hall filled with delegates. Overlord Vexith and Archon Luminara entered from opposite sides, meeting in the center where Taman waited. "We heard what you did," Vexith said quietly. His voice carried genuine respect. "You saved us all." "You fell 60 meters and survived," Luminara added. "The statistical probability of survival was less than 3%. "I am very stubborn," Taman replied. Both leaders made sounds that might have been laughter. The treaty was signed. Humanity, the weakest species, had done the impossible. They had turned enemies into partners. And they had proven that weakness, properly used, was the strongest thing in the galaxy. But Taman knew this was just the beginning. The real work started now. 10 years had passed since the treaty signing at Unity Point. The neutral station still floated in the Terran corridor, but it had grown. What started as a single diplomatic outpost had become a thriving hub where 3 species worked, lived, and built something new together. Lee Taman stood at an observation deck, watching ships come and go. His body had healed from that terrible fall, though he still limped when it rained. Some wounds never completely disappeared, but he had learned that was okay. Scars were proof of survival. He was 44 now, his hair showing gray at the temples. He had been promoted to senior ambassador, which meant more responsibility and less free time. But he did not mind. This work mattered. Still thinking about the old days? Ambassador Park Mina's voice came from behind him. She had officially retired 5 years ago, but kept finding excuses to visit. Today she was here for the anniversary celebration. Always, Taman admitted. Do you ever wonder if it was all real? If we actually stopped that war? We did more than stop a war, Mina replied. We started something new. She was right. The Shattered Reach mining operation had begun 7 years ago. It employed over 50,000 workers from all 3 species. Engineers from the Draxil used their strength to build massive extraction platforms. Technicians from the Velkari operated delicate sensor arrays to monitor the nebula's stability. Humans coordinated everything, making sure all voices were heard and all concerns addressed. It was messy and complicated and occasionally frustrating. But it worked. The profits were split exactly as promised. Both empires were getting rich from careful, sustainable extraction. More importantly, they were talking to each other, really talking, not just exchanging threats. Trade agreements had followed the mining treaty, cultural exchanges, even joint scientific projects. The ceremony starts in an hour, Mina reminded him. You need to prepare. Taman nodded. Today was the 10th anniversary of the treaty signing. Both Overlord Vexith and Archon Luminara would be attending. So would representatives from dozens of other species who wanted to study how humanity had achieved the impossible. But as Taman prepared, he received an urgent message. Commander Kang De-hyun, now an admiral commanding the joint peacekeeping fleet, needed to speak with him immediately. They met in a secure conference room. De-hyun's face was grim. We have a problem. A serious one. Tell me, Taman said. 3 weeks ago, a mining platform in the Reach detected an anomaly. Something inside the nebula that should not be there. We sent a science team to investigate. What they found changes everything. De-hyun activated a holographic display. It showed complex readings that Taman could barely understand. But he understood the conclusion written in bold text at the bottom. The cascade failure, Taman read aloud. It is happening sooner than predicted. 50 years, we said. But this says 20 years, De-hyun confirmed. Maybe less. The mining operation is destabilizing the nebula faster than our models predicted. Taman felt his stomach drop. We have to shut it down, immediately. That is the problem. If we shut down mining now, both empires lose trillions in future profits. The treaty is built on that economic cooperation. Without it, they go back to being enemies, Taman finished. They stood in silence, the weight of the problem settling over them. 10 years of peace. Thousands of workers building lives together, all of it threatened by physics they could not control. Does anyone else know? Taman asked. The science team. A few high-level officials. We have kept it quiet while figuring out what to do. But we cannot hide this forever. Both empires have their own scientists monitoring the Reach. They will figure it out soon. Then we need to tell them first, Taman decided. On our terms. At the anniversary ceremony. Today. De-hyun looked shocked. Today? In front of everyone? If we hide this and they discover it later, they will never trust humanity again. The peace will collapse. We have to be honest, even if it costs us everything. Vexith and Luminara will be furious. They might declare war on each other. Or on us. Maybe, Taman agreed. But maybe not. We have to try. He spent the next hour preparing what might be the most important speech of his life. Dr. Han Ji-woo helped him understand the psychological impact on both species. Kim Hyun-jin, now a senior coordination officer, gathered all the technical data he would need. The anniversary ceremony began on schedule. The main conference hall was packed with delegates. Overlord Vexith sat on a specially designed throne, looking older but still powerful. Archon Luminara floated in her designated space, her crystalline form reflecting the lights beautifully. Taemin was scheduled to give the opening remarks. He walked to the center of the hall, his slight limp barely noticeable. He looked out at the crowd, seeing humans and Draxil and Velkari sitting together. 10 years ago, that would have been impossible. He began with prepared remarks about the success of the treaty, the economic benefits, the cultural exchanges, the friendships formed between species that once saw each other as enemies. Everyone smiled and nodded. Then he changed direction. But today I must share difficult news. The room went silent. Vexith leaned forward, suspicious. Luminara's crystals dimmed slightly. The shattered reach is becoming unstable faster than we predicted. Our original estimate was 50 years until cascade failure. New data suggests we have 20 years, maybe less. The reaction was immediate and intense. Draxil delegates roared with anger. Velkari minds hummed with distressed frequencies. Human observers looked terrified. "This is betrayal," General Kyrix shouted, standing from his seat. "You promised us centuries of profits. You lied." "We did not lie," Taemin said firmly. "We made our best prediction with the data we had. We were wrong, and now we must adapt." "Adapt to what?" Sentinel Crystalline demanded. "Losing everything we invested?" "No. Adapt to a new reality." Taemin activated displays around the hall, showing the data. "The cascade will happen. We cannot stop that, but we can control when and how. If we shut down mining now and begin a controlled destabilization, we can direct the energy release safely, turn a catastrophe into a controlled event, and lose decades of potential extraction," Vexith growled. "Yes, but you keep what you have already extracted. You avoid losing your border worlds when the cascade happens naturally. And most importantly, we prove that this partnership can survive setbacks." Archon Luminara rotated slowly, processing this. "You are asking us to sacrifice profit for safety, to trust that human calculations are correct this time." "Yes," Taemin admitted. "I am asking you to trust us, even though we were wrong before, even though this costs you dearly, because the alternative is worse for everyone." The hall erupted in argument. Draxil and Velkari delegates shouted at each other and at the humans. Some demanded immediate withdrawal from the treaty. Others called for investigations. A few suggested that humanity had sabotaged the operation intentionally. Taemin let them argue. He knew they needed to express their anger and fear. Finally, Overlord Vexith raised his hand, demanding silence. 10 years ago, a human stood between our fleets and refused to move. He showed us that weakness could be strength, that vulnerability could be power. Vexith looked directly at Taemin. "You fell 60 meters to save our lives. You broke your body for peace. I do not believe you would throw that away with lies." "The Velkari Collective agrees," Luminara chimed. "Our analysis of the data confirms human findings. The cascade is accelerating. The question is not whether to act, but how." "Then let us act together," Taemin said. "We built this partnership to last centuries. 20 years is not enough. But maybe that is okay. Maybe we learned enough in 10 years to try something bigger." "What do you propose?" Vexith asked. Taemin had been thinking about this since learning the news. "The controlled destabilization will release enormous energy. Energy that could be catastrophic or could be useful. What if we harvest it? Build a massive energy collection system. Turn the cascade into the largest power generation event in galactic history." The room went quiet as everyone processed this idea. The energy released would be equivalent to 1,000 stars burning for a year, one of the Velkari scientists calculated. If captured efficiently, it could power both empires for decades. But building such a system would require unprecedented cooperation, a Draxil engineer pointed out. Every resource, every technology, everything working together. Yes, Taman agreed. It would be the biggest project any of our species has ever attempted. It would require trust. It would require sacrifice. It would require believing that together we can do what none of us could do alone. And if we fail, Kyrix demanded. Then we fail together, Taman replied. But I would rather fail trying than succeed at staying apart. Elder Vornak, the ancient Draxil who had helped verify the original data years ago, rose slowly. I am old. I have seen many wars. I have seen the Draxil Dominion at its strongest. But I have never seen us build something like this. Something that makes us stronger by sharing rather than conquering. The Velkari have existed for 10,000 years, Luminara said. We achieved perfection millennia ago. Or so we thought. But these last 10 years taught us that perfection is not the absence of problems. It is the ability to solve them together. She turned to face Vexith directly. Overlord, I propose we accept the human plan. Not because I trust them completely, but because I trust what we have built together enough to try. Vexith was silent for a long moment. His glowing eyes moved from Luminara to Taman to the delegates filling the hall. Finally, he nodded. The Draxil Dominion accepts. We will help build this energy collection system, and we will show the galaxy that former enemies can become partners in creating wonders. The hall erupted in cheers, though some delegates still looked uncertain. Taman felt relief wash over him. They had bought themselves a chance. Now they had to make it work. The next 10 years would later be called the Cooperation Age. All three species threw themselves into the massive project. Draxil engineering expertise designed the collection arrays. Velkari scientific knowledge mapped the cascade patterns. Human coordination and problem-solving kept millions of workers organized across hundreds of construction sites. It was the hardest thing any of them had ever done. There were setbacks. Several construction platforms were destroyed when they miscalculated the nebula's instability. 57 workers died over the years, from all three species. Each death was mourned by everyone, regardless of species. They had become something new, not human or Draxil or Velkari, something bigger. Kim Hyunjin led the safety protocols, using her anxiety as an advantage. Her ability to imagine everything that could go wrong saved countless lives. Commander Daehyun commanded the security fleet that protected the construction sites from pirates and extremists who still opposed cooperation. Dr. Han Ji-woo established schools throughout the Reach, where children from all three species learned together. They grew up not seeing differences, but seeing possibilities. Champion Drexer and Blade Luminos became legendary figures, symbols of warriors who chose to build rather than destroy. They led the honor guards at every major ceremony, standing together as proof that ancient enemies could become trusted allies. Taman's younger brother, Lee Jamin, became a transport pilot ferrying workers and materials to the Reach. He married a Draxil engineer, which would have been unthinkable 15 years earlier. Now it was just unusual enough to be notable, but not shocking. Ambassador Park Mina finally fully retired at 70, but not before seeing the energy collection system nearing completion. She died peacefully 2 years later, knowing her life's work had meant something. 20 years after the original treaty, they activated the collection system. The cascade began exactly as predicted. The shattered Reach collapsed in a spectacular release of energy that lit up sensors across the galaxy. But this time, instead of destruction, that energy flowed into collection arrays. It filled storage matrices. It powered transfer beams that sent clean, endless energy to both empires and to human space. Taman, now 54 and senior enough to have real authority, watched from Unity Point's observation deck. The light show was beautiful. Dangerous energies becoming useful power. Chaos becoming order. "We did it," Kim Hyunjin said, standing beside him. She was 35 now, married to a Velkari technician expecting their first child. That should have been biologically impossible, but they were adopting across species lines, another thing that would have been unthinkable before. "We did," Taman agreed. "But it was never really about the energy, was it?" "No," Hyunjin understood. "It was about proving cooperation works, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard." In the years that followed, the model established in the Shattered Reach spread across the galaxy. Other species approached humanity to mediate their conflicts. The Terran Diplomatic Corps became famous for achieving the impossible. But Taman knew the truth. It was not that humans were special. It was that they were weak enough to need cooperation, fragile enough to understand the value of peace, young enough to not be trapped by tradition. 5 years later, Taman finally retired. He moved to a small colony on the edge of human space, far from politics and diplomacy. But he kept in touch with old friends and former enemies who had become partners. One day, he received a visit from 2 very old beings. Overlord Vexith, now ancient by Draxel standards, could barely walk. Archon Luminara's crystal structure had dimmed with age. They came together, which was noteworthy in itself. "We wanted to see you before we die," Vexith said, his voice quieter than Taman remembered. "To say something we should have said 30 years ago." "You were right," Luminara continued. "We called humans weak. We were wrong. Weakness is just strength that has not found its purpose yet." "You taught us that," Vexith added. "An entire galaxy is different because one human refused to move from between our fleets." Taman smiled. "I did not do it alone. Thousands of people from all 3 species made this work." "Yes," Vexith agreed. "But you started it. You stood there, fragile and small and completely outmatched, and you said, 'No more war.' That took courage we did not understand at the time." They talked for hours, 3 old beings who had shaped history remembering how they had done it. When they finally left, Taman felt at peace. Years later, when historians asked how humanity had changed the galaxy, they told the story of Lee Taman standing between 2 empires. Some versions made him a hero. Others made him a tactical genius. Some even claimed he had supernatural powers. But the truth was simpler and more profound. He was just a human who refused to accept that weakness meant defeat. Who understood that the strongest thing in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the courage to build something better. The Terran corridor remained a symbol of cooperation for generations. The energy from the Shattered Reach powered 3 civilizations for a century. Children of all species grew up learning about the human who jumped 60 meters to save everyone. But Taman's real legacy was something harder to measure. He proved that peace was not the absence of conflict. It was the daily choice to work together despite differences, to build despite setbacks, to trust despite fear. He died at 87, surrounded by friends and family from 3 species. His funeral was attended by thousands. Draxil warriors stood honor guard beside Velkari philosophers and human diplomats. They all mourned the man who had shown them that weakness, properly understood, was the foundation of everything strong. And in the Terran corridor, on Unity Point Station, they built a memorial, not a statue of a warrior or a monument to strength. Instead, they built a garden where plants from 3 homeworlds grew together, their roots intertwined, supporting each other. Above the garden, words were carved in 3 languages. They called us weak because we were fragile. They called us soft because we felt pain. They called us insignificant because we were young. But when two empires stood ready to burn the galaxy, one human stood between them and asked, "What if strength means choosing not to fight?" And the galaxy learned that weakness is not fragility. Weakness is refusing to try. Decades later, humans would venture further into the galaxy. They would meet new species and face new challenges. But they carried with them the lesson that Taman had taught, that being weak was not the same as being powerless, that the most dangerous thing in nature was something that refused to die. And sometimes, when the galaxy threatened to tear itself apart again, someone would remember the human who stood between empires, who fell 60 meters and survived, who proved that the strongest force in the universe was not weapons or walls, but the stubborn refusal to give up on peace. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not superior technology or military might, but the understanding that survival was not about being the strongest. It was about being the most stubborn. About looking at impossible odds and saying, "We have to try anyway." Because that was what humans did. They tried impossible things, and sometimes they made them possible.